get going, like for anyone who's watching this now, I don't know if we're going to present this as like a separate show or not, but just see how it goes.
Sure.
Like I think it's going to be a make a thing to start off at, and we may retitle it and spin it off if we keep on talking about it.
Sure.
But none of us here, hello everybody, are AI specialists in any way. Do we know nothing about the actual technology, and we can't,
or economists,
or anything that we will definitely be talking about. Like it's fair to say that we're writers and artists, and we are, deeply I don't know if concern is the right word, but we're certainly invested in what happens with AI and the development of AI and all these creative fronts.
But we're also people who are inclined towards reflection. Like I think we all think of ourselves as thoughtful people, and we've put some thought into this. And so I don't think that we're going to be able to say this is what's going to happen. But I think we are going to be able to say, hey, let me save you 45 minutes of rumination. Here's this is the direction you might go in.
Right.
Maybe you want to take it from here.
Right.
And how does it relate to our story?
Yeah, and that's the point I was going to bring up. Is like people have very strong opinions on all of this stuff. But what you're watching right now is in relation to a multimedia thing that we call Wisteria. So it's a story project that has many different fronts, and it has a lot to do with AI. And so our ultimate goal is we're trying to figure out the fictionalization of this stuff. So with that to kick us off, Gareth, you just wrote up a great general document about AI and the broader implications. Like, what's the thing that you see as the most important aspect of the conversation we have in regards to our story, but also in terms of like what everyone is talking about right now?
Well, I mean, a lot of what people are talking about right now boils down to copyright and how these models are trained, and what they're generating and who owns it and stuff like that. And those are all important questions. But we're for purposes of our story, we're really looking at what are we going to have 20 or 25 years from now, and the whole landscape is going to be totally different, and it's going to totally transform what work means. And so a lot of what I've been noodling on and we've been talking about, I think is sort of focused on like, how are we as a society going to adapt to, basically all creative and information jobs being doable by AIs. And part of that, comes down to maybe some kind of model of universal basic income with the additional productivity that AIs create being sort of distributed through a model like UBI, or that there's some kind of very sophisticated clearinghouse for the sort of rights that the AI has gobbled up in order to spit out stuff, and that maybe people are sort of essentially getting royalties all the time because their work is included in these massive databases that are used to train the AIs.
What AI art has brought to the fore for me is the way that we think about the production of art as artists is sort of philosophically messed up. And I think that we have already ourselves sort of diminished the value of imagery so thoroughly because of capitalism, and how we think about what art means to us, that this just sort of made things shocking. Sort of like instantly we're like, this is valueless. Like, and that was the immediate response, and which is for artists, that's to say you are valueless. And I feel in some way we already were believing that, and it was to the detriment of how we view that, what we were getting out of what we do. And this just sort of made it high contrast. Does that make any sense? I don't know. It's a very vague thing to say.
I have the feeling I'm going to be the straw man in this discussion.
Hit it.
Like, I'm going to take an opposing point of view, and for the purpose of you, making me out to be an idiot and sort of clarifying your point of view. But when you mention how we have to have an economy, you're putting the cart before the horse. Like, that needs to be inverted for starters. We don't need to do things to have an economy. The economy is a means to an end. We have an economy in order that all these people can get along and not be knifing each other and so forth, that they can have some interactions that aren't fundamentally, destructive. Setting aside the fact that the economy can already be used to destructive ends, I'm just saying, compared to knifing each other all the time.
What about the people that want to knife people?
All right, we'll get there. We won't ever get there.
They're having a moment.
They're having. I'm very inclined to look at this from the perspective of the people who own the stuff. Like the place my mind goes is, how is this different from any other, top-down control mechanism that has, how is this different from monarchy? How is it different from the French Revolution? How is it different from all these other things? And two differences I see are that we have better means of keeping people mollified, keeping their attention off stuff. Although having them be uneducated was pretty good for a while. And then the second one is actually three, come to think of it. Armies no longer require people. That's a biggie, right? You can own an army without participation from anyone else. And then the third one is that we have good fear amplification devices and anxiety amplification devices. We can make a small army look big, and we can do it plausibly. So I put all those together, and it's like, for me, this is just a question of like, right? In this dialogue, right? I'm Jeff Bezos, I'm Elon Musk, I'm, whoever, right? How am I going to lock down my piece of the pie better? And that immediately brings me on to how is my piece of the pie already locked down, right? Like, we all believe in the idea of property rights. Well, that benefits me more than it benefits you, my friend. We all believe in the idea of, rule of law. Well, the people with the better lawyers are going to be better off with that sort of system, right? And we increasingly believe that money is value in sort of a moral sense. The notion that God gives to those, like that wealth is an indication of God's favor, right? Well, who does that benefit? So we've got all these really strong cultural memes, right? Oh, the other one I forgot to mention is anyone can become me. How many people act because they believe they're going to be in a better situation soon, and they want to make sure to set themselves up for success once they're there. UBI is coming. I don't accept that, except I do note that UBI is a way to keep people to keep the little guy from becoming an annoyance in other more costly ways.
Well, and literally one of the selling points for UBI is simply that it is a simpler, smaller government version of welfare. And you can sell some conservatives on it by saying all of that, you can dismantle all of that machinery and just give people some money.
Well, I think that it's very interesting. Like, first of all, actually, I agreed with almost everything you said, Wes.
Oh, all right, kind of didn't,
But yeah, so yeah, I think that there's the question that comes up: what is your value to yourself if you don't have to do anything, right?
Well, let's look at this in a historical context. First, to answer your question of what are we going to do if we can just sit around doing nothing all day, relative to a Middle Ages serf, I spend an enormous amount of time doing nothing. In fact, compared to a Middle Ages serf, I probably spend more time doing nothing good than he had moments in the first place.
Agreed.
Okay.
Plus, he lived half as long.
Well, that's why,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And so I don't think any reasonable person is going to argue that we were better off then.
Right.
Okay. So it's like, okay, you know what, we can afford to have a bunch of time wasted. Now, there's another issue here, though, which is that who's to say that I'm wasting my time when I'm screwing around? Like, I'm thinking specifically of the fact that, like, I've totally gotten into this human against human video game that I play a lot of. I'm in no danger of ever getting good at it, but it's one of these esports where the people you play against are reliably so much better than you are that it's just a pantsing every time, right? And and I'm finding this to be it's a fun game, but it's also a really valuable to me meditation on being a beginner.
Right.
I like my vocation is to teach kids how to be successful beginners as they're moving through certain stages of their academic development. And it's helpful to me to remember that, like, although I can do calculus with a hand tied behind my back, here's a realm in which I barely know the alphabet relative to what some of my competitors understand about this game. It's a very helpful thing. So on one hand, I'm completely screwing around. On the other hand, I'm being productive. On the third hand, I'm enjoying my life and the way it connects up to other things. And, you know, I'm meeting new people and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
So, I mean, Gareth, would you connect that to the idea of, you know, it's like the Zen idea of the beginner's mind, right? Because that,
yeah, I would. And also, you know, one of the things that you said early on that resonated with me is that essentially, if nobody will pay me for my art anymore, I have the exact same problem that I have if I have enough money that I don't have to make art anymore. It's actually, you know, it's not all of my problems are the same, but the fundamental problem of why I make art and what I make is the same.
Right. Wait, that's really important. That's really important.
It's a great observation. This is amazing.
And so that is the like glass half empty, glass half full view of AI right there. Is like, okay, you know, I'm going to be out of a job because nobody will pay me for this thing. Is a very real fear that some people are facing right now today. And yet at the same time, we're looking at a future in which nobody has to do anything potentially.
What we're experiencing currently, and sort of the dramatic problem of what we're trying to write, for instance, right, is that, you know, we have this idea of, like, we started this years ago, and our idea of what this universe is now being, you know, like, we have to confront the fact that AI is changing everything in a way that is going to be really obvious. Do we just stick to the fiction we've set up, or do we adjust so that it connects more with people? And, like, I think our feeling is that we should at least try to make a bridge, because especially just like it's already a good metaphor for this.
I'd like to talk for a moment about exercise. I do not exercise as much as I perhaps could or should, but I've had times in my life when I did, and I felt better during those times. And as a result of that memory or whatever, my big New Year's resolution is to get in better shape, just for general health reasons. And it occurs to me that while I can absolutely play the game of tricking myself into enjoying the exercise while I'm in the middle of it, okay, I can play loud music and I can get all excited about how I've gone for 19 minutes today and all that. The fact is, it's an unpleasant thing that I'd rather be on the couch eating bonbons 100% every single time. Anyone who tells you they enjoy exercise, not buying it.
Bonbons also my goal.
Yeah, totally. But here's the thing, like, we all understand very deep in our bones that, like, if we are exercising regularly, the rest of our lives are so much better across other axes that it's worth the discomfort. And in fact, if you build on it for long enough, even the discomfort of exercise brings you down to a level that's higher than you would have been if you were eating bonbons all the time.
Right. This is true.
So the argument of, like, well, geez, if there's no need for anyone to do anything, they'll just sit around and eat bonbons, I call BS on that. I really do. Because, like, guess what? We exercise to some degree. Like, we have a clear drive. And it's hard for me to imagine that we're going to sit around and do nothing, because I know what that feeling is. That feeling is short-term pleasant and long-term not.
Right.
And we're not good enough to always do what's in our best interests, but we're also not bad enough to completely neglect it either.
In the perfect AI, you know, makes everything a zillion times easier world where nobody has to work, like, people are absolutely free to watch all seasons of Star Trek on a loop for the rest of their lives. Like, totally free to do this, right? I assume that someone will want to do that. Like, it sounds terrible to me, but I'd stick to the first series, not the other ones. But I mean,
I will begin down that road.
Yeah, for sure. At some point I would do this. But like, but I think that I just love fucking making stuff and working on things. Like, that's what my joy is. And I think that's true for pretty much everybody about something. You know, this is just, that's where we find the most consistent joy, right? And so when what it brings up for me, which you said brings up for me, is that in this middle land where we are making this uncomfortable transition between these states, right? We have actually, like, we have all this extra time, as you said, like way more so, because like compared to the serfs, this kind of thing. And what we have filled it with is a desperate need to prove ourselves in all sorts of weird little ways against other people and compete with other things, and blah 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 blah, that are offered by people that are desperately trying to make money off of our available time to waste, right? And so you have like there's a then like say Twitter, for instance, is designed entirely around something, a money-making model that if I had to work as much as a serf, I wouldn't bother with ever, right? And if I had all the time in the world, I probably also wouldn't bother with, right? Like this is not, I'd be like, why am I even, like, politics are taken care of, blah blah blah, needs are taken care of. I'm not going to fucking argue about Donald Trump in the world of perfect AI, because that doesn't happen anymore. I'm going to do something long term that I really enjoy, and I'm in a much less distractible state. But right now we're in a very intercompetitive state where we're trying to figure out what our happiness is with the minimal amount of time that we have available to us. And it makes us very, very frustrated and atomized about how we apply it. And I feel like that's what's happening. It's just like when I look at what artists are suffering with now, and I totally sympathize with the stresses that they're describing. And I think that, to bring it back around to what I said initially, it's just like it really makes us confront why the hell we're doing something, and I think that as artists, like because we struggle to get like we equate our value with the money we make. We equate the joy of making things and making art with money. Like we devalue it, and that's before AI came out.
Money is not only a means of exchange, but also a convenient way of, I don't want to say keeping score, because that suggests that I want more than you, just of keeping track, maybe. One of the challenges of having art no longer be forced to be connected to money is you have to figure out what other value it may have for you.
Yeah.
And I know as a musician, that's been a real thing for me, right? It's like I'm never going to be a musician who's going to make any money off my music. Performing, maybe, sure, but just the music itself, no. I've gotten checks for having music played on, TV shows and radio and stuff like that, and they're just, it's never going to matter. Right. Right. It's like, oh, I hit the big time. I gotta, no one cares. And it occurs to me that we're forgetting at our peril, right, that money is a very handy mental shortcut. When you buy into the capitalist system, it removes a lot of friction from your thought, because you don't need to think about whether the thing you're doing is the right thing or not. It either makes money or it doesn't. I mean, setting aside, gross moral and ethical issues. I don't mean to be getting into that water, but is the thing I'm doing valuable or not? Well, put it in the market. The market will tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
As opposed to, I am spending my limited life energy on this. Is this where I want to be directing it? That's
the actual value.
Right.
That's the real coin.
And we forget that all the freaking time, because we have this proxy that our society reinforces so hard for us. And we get a lot of benefits out of having that proxy. Like not spending time thinking about whether something is valuable means we can spend more time doing the valuable stuff.
Right.
Provided the value that the system is telling you something is worth actually accords with what you think it's worth.
Right.
But part of what I'm saying is that, right, as a small business owner, one of the sort of mental evolutions I've undertaken over the years has been one that makes money more central to the operation of my business. And I don't mean like I've taken the red pill and fallen into a whatever. I don't mean anything like that. I just mean, as I've been thinking about, okay, what do I want to do in this business, right? it's easy for me to say, well, what do I want to do in this business? And that's a piece of it. What am I good at? But there's also the piece of like, what will other people pay me for? What do they value? And it forces you to think that way. And if you can in a capitalist society sort of say, okay, I'm just going to regard money as the objective function here, right? What earns more money is a better thing to make, right? It turns out you have to, that's a difficult perspective to take in the beginning.
Right.
Of like, well, how can that be the objective function? Like there's a bunch that goes into it, like what's valuable to blah, blah. And it's like, nope, money takes care of all that. Oh, okay, great. I'll just drive towards putting more value in the world. And a lot of really good, generous people have that mindset of like, if it makes more money, it's more valuable to the people, do more of it, you know? And as long as there are no distortions in the system, biggest caveat ever, that's a fair way to look at it. But what I'm coming to realize is that some of the ways in which I've changed my thinking in accordance with that objective function do not actually align with my values as well as I'd like them to be, because the system has some distortions in it. And then it's like, well, all right, why don't we just account for this other thing with our charitable donations and our other generous actions? And it's like, well, that only gets you so far.
Well, you know, it's like you used a really interesting phrase in there that is an AI connected phrase, right? That I think is really interesting. There's that when, like, for instance, the Terminator happens, like AI Skynet takes over and kills us all. All right, that is an aspect of, and AI people out there can tell me if I got this wrong, but this is what I believe is the case. That's an aspect of what they call the alignment problem, right? And what you need to do is, when you're designing AI, is try to align it to human interests all the time. Like, it can be very difficult to do that because there's a danger that AI will just go off and do its own thing, right? Whether its own thing is, what if I destroyed everybody on the earth, or what if I turned the world into paper clips, or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
You know, you constantly have to think about the alignment problem. And one of the things is they hope is like, once we can ask the AI how to solve the alignment problem, like embedding that, it will hopefully be sealed with us forever. What we have, and what you just said, is trying to align our actual spiritual life fulfillment with the system that is there to manage it, is exactly the same problem. Like, we are trying to align, it's the alignment problem of, I am trying to have a joyful human existence. And here's this mechanism that we use called capitalism, which seems to be going off down this other road that is no longer aligned with us. And so trying to correct that and bring it back in line with what is actually gives us joy is the most difficult problem to face, even on a personal level. And the more abstract it becomes, the harder it is to even convince companies to talk about. So I think that this comes down finally to our story, that our story is much about corporations and money and AI and the little guy trying to find joy in that world, right? And I think that the alignment problem that is central to all of that crosses over, like, in actual day-to-day joy of life, in spiritual artistic satisfaction, and also just eating food. Like, these things all have to find a way to live together. And when things are built to be in competition in order to grow, that makes that very, very difficult. So that's what I think we're talking about in the story. Does that sum that up?
I think so. I think we're now poised to have the discussion we're here for, which we'll have to wait till next time.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, guys. And thanks to everybody for listening on this. And let us know if you want us to put this up as a separate thing, apart from Make a Thing. Oh, and yeah, Wes, it looks like you want to add one more bit. Hit it.
No, I was just emphasizing what you're saying.
Okay, that's just a vote. I love it. All right, I love that. I'm certainly happy to talk about this at the drop of a hat.
Okay, Sam Rockwell.
Exactly. But there will be more Make a Things happening. We're doing a lot of growing this year for Wisteria to sort of make it more accessible and sort of less front-end bizarre. So we're hoping that this is part of that. Please pass this around, and we'll see you next time on whatever the hell we call this thing.